In the heart of Japan, during a time of great chaos known as the Sengoku Jidai, or the Age of Warring States, lived a powerful family. This was the Takeda Clan of Kai Province. For many years they were led by a man so fierce and wise in battle that he was called the Tiger of Kai. His name was Takeda Shingen. Under his command, the Takeda clan became one of the most feared and respected forces in the land. Their warriors, especially their cavalry, were famous across the country. They rode into battle with great courage, a tide of men and horses that few could stand against. Shingen was a brilliant strategist, always thinking many steps ahead of his enemies, and his dream was to march to the capital, Kyoto, and bring the nation under his rule. The Takeda clan was not just known for its military might, it was a symbol of traditional samurai power. They followed the old ways of war, believing in the strength of a direct, overwhelming charge and the honor of single combat between champions. Their banner, with its distinctive four-diamond crest, was a sight that brought fear to their foes and immense pride to their followers. Takeda Shingen had spent decades building this legacy, expanding his territory and defeating famous rivals. His name was whispered with respect even in the courts of his greatest enemies, men like Oda Nobunaga and Tokugawa Ieyasu. The Takeda were the embodiment of the classic samurai warrior, a force of nature that seemed unstoppable. This period of Japanese history was a time of constant struggle. Powerful lords called daimyo fought each other for land and control. It was a brutal and unforgiving age where alliances were made and broken in the blink of an eye. The Takeda clan, nestled in their mountainous homeland, had carved out a strong domain through sheer force of will and military genius. They controlled gold mines that funded their armies and had a core of loyal and experienced generals who had served Shingen for years. These veteran commanders were the backbone of the Takeda war machine, legends in their own right who understood the art of battle as well as their lord. The future of the Takeda seemed bright and powerful, as long as the Tiger of Kai was leading them. However, the winds of fate are ever-changing, and no man, not even a tiger, can live forever. In the year 1573, while on campaign, and seemingly on the verge of realizing his greatest ambition, Takeda Shingen fell ill and died. His death was kept a secret for as long as possible, for the Takeda knew that news of their leader's passing would be seen as a moment of weakness by their enemies. The great clan was now in the hands of his son, Takeda Katsuyori. He was a brave warrior, but he was not his father. He inherited the mightiest army in Japan, but he also inherited his father's powerful enemies and the immense pressure to prove that he was a worthy successor to the legendary Tiger of Kai. The Takeda clan's story is one of ambition, power, and the relentless march of time, a tale etched into the very fabric of Japan's tumultuous history. In the heart of Kai Province, the legacy of the Takeda clan lingered in every stone and shadow. The halls of the Takeda stronghold echoed with the silent weight of expectation, the air thick with the memory of past glories and the unspoken hopes for the future. Within these walls, the tools of war were always ready, blades sharpened, armour polished, banners prepared to be raised at a moment's notice. The Takeda clan's martial spirit was ever present, a force that demanded to be proven on the field of battle. Yet the shadow of Takeda Shingen, the Tiger of Kai, loomed over every decision. His presence was felt not in words, but in the silent reverence paid to his memory, and in the weight of his unfulfilled ambitions. The council chambers, once filled with the voices of seasoned generals, now stood quiet. The wisdom of the elders lingered in the air, their cautious strategies etched into the very grain of the wood. The pressure to surpass the past was palpable. Only a victory greater than any before could break the silence and bring new honor to the Takeda name. This ambition was a restless wind, stirring the Takeda army to action. The call to arms echoed through the valleys, driving the clan to take bold risks and face dangers that others would have shunned. The spirit of the tiger was not just a memory, it was a living force, woven into every banner and every blade, urging the clan onward. In the year 1575, the dawn brought with it a sense of destiny. The time for decisive action had arrived. Disregarding the cautious words preserved in old letters and maps, the Takeda leadership set their sights on a bold invasion into Tokugawa territory. The enemy was formidable. Tokugawa Ieyasu, a master of patience and cunning, stood allied with Oda Nobunaga, whose ambition and ruthlessness were legendary. The chosen target was Nagashino, a small but vital fortress in Mikawa province, its position commanding the routes into enemy lands. By capturing this stronghold, the Takeda believed they could carve a path deep into Tokugawa territory and force a battle that would decide everything. Confidence surged through the Takeda camp. The army, 15,000 strong, was the same force that had once been invincible under Shingen's command. The campaign began with hope shimmering in the dawn, the promise of glory reflected in every polished blade and fluttering banner. Then a secret message arrived. A traitor within the Tokugawa ranks, Oga Yashiro, promised to open the gates of Okazaki Castle. This promise seemed like a sign from the heavens, a divine assurance that victory was within reach. But the plot was uncovered. The traitor's fate was sealed, and the hope of an easy victory vanished as swiftly as it had appeared. Undeterred, the Takeda resolve only hardened. The campaign pressed on, the army's determination unbroken by the setback. The siege of Nagashino began. The Takeda army encircled the fortress, preparing for a swift and overwhelming assault. Inside, the defenders were few, their supplies limited. The Takeda believed the fortress would fall quickly, delivering the glory they sought. But as the clouds gathered, the true danger of the siege became clear. The decision to attack Nagashino would prove disastrous. The siege gave Tokugawa Ieyasu and Oda Nobunaga the one thing they needed most: time to gather their strength. As the Takeda army tightened its grip, urgent messages sped across the countryside calling for aid. Nobunaga, recognizing the threat to his ambitions, responded without hesitation, preparing his forces for war. A massive army began to assemble, the ground trembling beneath the weight of thousands of warriors converging on Nagashino. The stage was set for a confrontation that would not only decide the fate of a single castle, but would alter the destiny of Japan itself. Unaware of the trap closing around him, the Takeda ambition pressed forward, drawn inexorably toward a fate that would echo through history. Nagashino Castle was not a mighty fortress. It stood quietly atop a gentle hill, its wooden walls weathered by years of wind and rain, blending into the lush green landscape of Mikawa province. The castle's simple construction, with its sloped roofs and sturdy palisades, gave little hint of the desperate struggle about to unfold within its walls. The fort's greatest strength was its location. Built where two rivers met, the castle was protected on multiple sides by swift, unpredictable currents. The water shimmered in the early morning light, forming a natural barrier that made direct assault difficult and dangerous. The wooden gates, reinforced with iron bands, stood firm against the threat outside. Arrow slits, narrow and purposeful, allowed defenders to watch the enemy's every move while remaining hidden in the shadows. Beyond the walls, the land was transformed. The Takeda army, 15,000 strong, had arrived in force. Their red banners, emblazoned with the Takeda Mon, rippled in the breeze, filling the fields and hillsides as far as the eye could see. The landscape was a sea of crimson, broken only by the dark shapes of war horses and the glint of armour. The Takeda banners seemed to swallow the horizon, a silent promise of the storm to come. The deep, thunderous beat of war drums echoed through the valley, their sound rolling over the rivers and up the castle walls. The rhythm was relentless, a constant reminder of the enemy's presence and power. Inside the castle, silence reigned. The ramparts, battered and scarred, bore witness to the relentless pressure from outside. Every creak of wood and whisper of wind seemed to carry the weight of impending doom. Supplies were running low. In the dim storerooms, sacks of rice grew lighter by the day, and water jars stood nearly empty. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and fatigue. The Takeda assault began in earnest. Flaming arrows arced through the sky, their trails illuminating the night as they crashed into the wooden walls, setting small fires that defenders scrambled to extinguish. Night after night, attackers tried to scale the ramparts, leaving behind ropes and broken weapons as evidence of their failed attempts. The Takeda even sent miners to dig beneath the castle's foundations, hoping to collapse the walls from below. Fresh piles of earth and abandoned tools marked their progress, but the defenders countered every move. The defenders responded with unwavering determination. Shields and spears stood ready along the ramparts, and every arrow fired by the enemy was answered in kind. Hope flickered with every distant signal fire and every ray of sunlight that broke through the clouds. The defenders believed that their lord, Tokugawa Ieyasu, would not abandon them. The banner of Okudaira Sadamasa flew defiantly above the keep, a symbol of courage and resolve. His leadership inspired the defenders to hold on, no matter the cost. Whenever the Takeda damaged the walls, the defenders worked tirelessly to repair them, patching holes and reinforcing weak points even as arrows rained down. Every attack was met with fierce resistance. The ground below the ramparts was littered with spent arrows and broken spears, silent evidence of the heavy price paid for every inch of ground. As the days turned into weeks, the situation inside the castle grew desperate. Candlelight flickered in the cramped quarters, illuminating the exhaustion etched into every corner. Food supplies dwindled to almost nothing. The defenders rationed every last grain of rice, knowing that starvation was as great a threat as the enemy outside. Morale began to falter. The once proud banners now hung limp, and the silence inside the castle grew heavier with each passing day. The defenders knew that if help did not arrive soon, they would face starvation or be overwhelmed by the next Takeda assault. In this darkest hour, a plan was born. The only hope lay in reaching Tokugawa Ieyasu and Oda Nobunaga to beg for immediate aid. A message was prepared, its contents a desperate plea for help. The risk was enormous, but there was no other choice. The Takeda had the castle surrounded on all sides. Guards and patrols watched every path, every shadow, making escape nearly impossible. The only possible route was through the water gate, down the river and into the darkness beyond the enemy lines. That night, under the cover of darkness, the plan was set in motion. The water gate creaked open, and a lone figure slipped into the river, vanishing into the night. The hopes and prayers of every soul within Nagashino Castle followed that silent swimmer into the unknown, clinging to the fragile thread of survival. In the dead of night, the forest surrounding Nagashino was thick with fog and silence. Somewhere within, a single set of footprints pressed into the damp earth, weaving between ancient roots and low-hanging branches. The air was heavy, every sound muffled by the mist, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Through this labyrinth of darkness and uncertainty, Torii Suneemon moved with purpose. His journey was not just a test of endurance, but of spirit. Each step over jagged rocks and through tangled undergrowth was driven by a duty that weighed heavier than his armour. Behind him, the besieged castle loomed, its walls barely visible in the gloom. The fate of everyone within those walls depended on the success of his mission. The silence of the night was broken only by the distant call of a night bird and the soft crunch of leaves underfoot. After hours of relentless travel, the first hints of dawn painted the sky. The journey had left him exhausted, but the sight of Okazaki, its rooftops glistening with morning dew, filled him with hope. In the heart of the camp, banners of Tokugawa and Oda fluttered, signalling the presence of powerful allies. The camp was alive with the quiet energy of preparation. Soldiers moved with purpose, assembling for what would become a massive relief force. The air was thick with anticipation, the ground trembling beneath the weight of thousands readying for battle. Suneemon's message was delivered with urgency. The desperate situation at Nagashino was laid bare. Every word a plea for swift action. The generals listened intently, their faces set with resolve as the gravity of the situation became clear. The leaders of the Allied armies, moved by the courage behind the message, wasted no time. Their admiration was silent but profound, reflected in the swift, decisive movements that followed. Orders were given. The Grand Army, 38,000 strong, would march at once. The ground shook as the first lines began to move, a river of armour and determination flowing toward Nagashino. With the promise of relief secured, Suneemon's mission was, in theory, complete. The safety of the camp beckoned, offering rest and protection behind the lines of the Allied army. He could have remained there, surrounded by the security of thousands, the threat of the enemy a distant memory. But the image of the castle, isolated and battered, haunted him. The thought of his friends and fellow defenders, still trapped and desperate, weighed heavily on his mind. He knew how much hope meant to those inside the walls. Driven by loyalty, he resolved to return, to bring them the message that help was on its way. The decision to go back, to face the dangers once more, was an act of courage and devotion that few could match. With the message of hope secured, he set out again, retracing his perilous route through the wild, determined to reach the castle before it was too late. Every step brought him closer to danger, the path now even more treacherous as he moved toward the heart of the enemy's grip. But fate was not on his side. As he neared the castle, the silence was shattered by the approach of enemy patrols. His attempt to slip past the Takeda lines failed. The enemy was vigilant, and the forest offered no more hiding places. He was brought before the Takeda command. The air inside the tent thick with tension and the scent of burning incense. The contents of his message were soon discovered. The Takeda leader, Katsuyori, saw a chance to turn the situation to his advantage. Suneemon was led to the edge of the castle moat, the water below reflecting the cold light of the moon. There a choice was offered: betray his comrades and call for their surrender, or face certain death. The promise was tempting: land, status, and a place among the Takeda. For a man of humble origins, it was a reward few could refuse. The weight of the offer hung in the air, a silent struggle between survival and loyalty. But Suneemon's loyalty was unshakable. No bribe, no threat could sway his heart. He was bound and brought before the castle, his silhouette stark against the fortress walls, a silent figure in the dawn light. Inside, the defenders watched from the shadows, their hopes hanging by a thread, bracing for the words that could spell their end. But instead of surrender, a cry of defiance rang out. The words echoed across the moat, carried by the wind: "Do not give up!" The message was clear. Reinforcements were coming. The armies of Ieyasu and Nobunaga were on their way. Hold on for just a little longer. The defenders felt hope surge within them, their resolve hardening like steel. The fortress, once shrouded in despair, now echoed with the silent cheers of those who knew they were not alone. Relief and gratitude swept through the defenders, a quiet but powerful wave of emotion. In the Takeda camp, fury erupted. Katsuyori's plans had been defied, and his anger was swift and merciless. Suneemon was executed, his body left as a grim warning, yet even in death his courage could not be erased. His final act of defiance became a beacon of hope. The dawn broke over Nagashino, and the defenders, inspired by his sacrifice, prepared to hold out for the relief that was surely coming. As dawn broke over the mist-shrouded plains of Shidarahara, the ground trembled with the silent promise of conflict. The Oda Tokugawa relief army, inspired by the sacrifice of Torii Suneemon, arrived in disciplined formation, their banners fluttering in the cool morning breeze. They took up position not far from the battered walls of Nagashino Castle, the air thick with anticipation and the scent of damp earth. Oda Nobunaga, renowned for his mastery of innovative tactics, surveyed the open expanse before him. The land was marked by gentle rises and dips, a river snaking quietly through the plain, and the distant silhouette of Nagashino Castle, standing as a silent witness to the coming storm. Nobunaga understood that the Takeda clan's greatest weapon was not merely their numbers, but the thunderous charge of their cavalry. The ground itself bore the scars of countless past assaults, deep hoofprints and churned mud, evidence of the power that had shattered so many enemy lines. To counter this, Nobunaga conceived a plan that would change the face of Japanese warfare. He ordered the construction of long wooden palisades, tall, sturdy fences stretching across the front of his position, their timbers freshly cut and smelling of sap. These barriers were meticulously erected, each stake driven deep into the soil, forming an unbroken line of defence. The palisades stood as silent sentinels, ready to blunt the force of any cavalry that dared approach. The design was simple, yet effective. The fences would sap the momentum of charging horses, forcing them to slow and funneling them into narrow gaps, where they would become easy targets for the defenders waiting behind. Behind these wooden walls, Nobunaga positioned his most crucial asset, 3,000 ashigaru, each armed with an arquebus. These early firearms, with their long barrels and gleaming metal, were carefully prepared for the coming battle, powder and shot arranged in orderly fashion. Firearms were still a novelty in Japan, their acrid smoke and thunderous noise unfamiliar to many. Traditionalists scoffed at these weapons, considering them unworthy of the samurai code, but Nobunaga saw beyond old prejudices. He recognized the potential of these new tools of war, understanding that discipline and firepower could overcome even the most fearsome cavalry. Nobunaga organized his gunners into 3 precise ranks, each line standing ready behind the palisades, their positions marked with care. The plan was as elegant as it was deadly. The first rank would unleash a volley, then step back to reload as the second rank advanced to fire, followed by the third. This rotation would ensure a relentless barrage, with no pause for the enemy to exploit. The result would be a ceaseless storm of iron and lead, a wall of fire and noise that no army in Japan had ever faced before. This strategy was designed to strip the Takeda of their greatest advantage, turning the open plain into a killing ground. As the first light of morning crept across the battlefield, the Takeda command faced a crucial decision. The air was thick with the weight of history, the silence before the storm. Despite the warnings of his seasoned generals, Takeda Katsuyori resolved to launch a full-scale frontal assault, placing his faith in the legendary might of his cavalry. The Takeda forces brimmed with confidence, certain that their charge would smash through any obstacle, as it had so many times before. As the first rays of sunlight touched the field, the deep, resonant beat of war drums echoed across the plain. signalling the start of the assault. Thousands of horses thundered forward, their hooves pounding the earth, the sound rolling like distant thunder. The morning sun caught on polished armour, sending flashes of light across the plain, while the air filled with the imagined cries of warriors. The Takeda cavalry, renowned for their courage, surged towards what they believed would be another glorious victory, the ground itself bearing witness to their valour. Their aim was clear: to break through the Oda Tokugawa lines with overwhelming force, trusting in the momentum of their charge. But as they neared the defences, the world changed. Instead of a clear path, they found a nightmare of obstacles and confusion. The moment the Takeda cavalry reached the palisades, a deafening volley erupted from behind the wooden walls, the air filled with the roar of gunfire and the acrid stench of burning powder. The relentless volleys tore through the ranks of the charging cavalry, the storm of lead cutting down anything in its path. Horses and riders fell in heaps, their armour and courage no match for the deadly bullets that swept the field. Those who survived the initial storm found themselves trapped, slowed by the fences and cut down by spears thrust from behind the barricades. Again and again the famed Takeda charge broke against the unyielding defences, each attempt leaving more devastation in its wake. Even the greatest of Takeda's leaders, men who had served for decades, fell amidst the chaos, their efforts to rally the troops lost in the storm. By the day's end, the once mighty Takeda army was shattered, the field strewn with the wreckage of their hopes and the silence of defeat. Over 10,000 men, and many of the clan's most experienced leaders, were lost, their legacy left scattered across the blood-soaked earth. The defeat was catastrophic, marking the beginning of the end for the mighty Takeda clan, a storm of iron and lead that swept away an age of legend. As the echoes of battle faded from the fields of Nagashino, the land itself seemed to mourn. The war with the Takeda clan raged on, but within the walls of the Tokugawa domain, a quieter, more insidious conflict was brewing, one that would leave scars deeper than any sword. Within the cold, echoing halls of Okazaki Castle, the air was thick with unspoken grievances and old resentments. The absence of laughter and the hush of servants spoke volumes about the tension that gripped the Tokugawa household. Lady Tsukiyama, once a proud daughter of the Imagawa, now lived apart from her husband. Her presence felt only in the subtle traces she left behind: an unfinished letter, a lingering scent of incense, a closed door. Isolated and resentful, she gazed out at the rain-soaked gardens, her thoughts turning ever more to the past and the enemies of her husband. The Takeda clan, once rivals, now seemed to her a possible instrument of vengeance. In the secrecy of night, messages began to pass from the castle. Letters written in a careful, practised hand, their contents hidden from all but the most trusted eyes. These missives, it is said, found their way to Takeda Katsuyori, urging him to press his attacks and perhaps revealing secrets of the Tokugawa lands. The web of intrigue grew. Alliances were hinted at through gifts and tokens, and the selection of a new concubine, her family once loyal to the Takeda, sent ripples through the household, disturbing the fragile peace. Tensions simmered between the official wife, Tokuhime, and the new arrival. The air in the women's quarters grew heavy with suspicion. Each gesture and glance weighed for hidden meaning. Tokuhime, feeling slighted and wary, watched the shifting alliances within her new family. Her unease grew until, unable to bear the uncertainty, she penned a letter to her father, Oda Nobunaga, her brush trembling as she wrote accusations of treason and conspiracy. The letter travelled swiftly, its words sharp as any blade. In it Tokuhime named not only her mother-in-law, but also her own husband as conspirators with the Takeda. The fate of the Tokugawa now hung on the contents of a single sheet of paper. When Nobunaga received the letter, the silence in his hall was broken only by the crackle of the hearth. His anger, though unseen, was felt like a storm gathering over the land. He demanded an investigation, and the order reached Ieyasu in the dead of night. The Lord of Mikawa was left alone with his thoughts, the weight of loyalty and love pressing down on him like the darkness itself. Ieyasu faced an impossible choice. To defy Nobunaga would mean certain destruction for his clan. To obey would mean sacrificing those closest to him. The dawn brought no comfort, only the cold certainty of duty. The decision was made. Orders were given in hushed voices, and the castle's corridors filled with the quiet preparations for tragedy. In the year 1579, Lady Tsukiyama was taken from her chambers. The castle grounds, usually alive with the sounds of daily life, fell silent as her fate was sealed. Soon after, the heir of the Tokugawa, Matsudaira Nobuyasu, prepared for his final act. The ritual of seppuku was carried out with solemn precision, the only witnesses the silent walls and the flickering candles. The alliance with Nobunaga was preserved, but the cost was a wound that would never heal. The halls of the Tokugawa castle echoed with loss, and Ieyasu, now more alone than ever, was left to contemplate the price of survival. In the Sengoku Jidai, even the mightiest lords could not escape the tragedies wrought by ambition and betrayal. The land remembered, and the storm rolled on. The years following the disaster at Nagashino and the internal drama of the Tokugawa were hard for Takeda Katsuyori. His clan was severely weakened, having lost many of its best warriors and most experienced generals. His authority began to crumble as his vassals started to doubt his leadership. In 1581, another blow fell when the Tokugawa besieged Takatenjin Castle, a key Takeda outpost. Katsuyori was unable to gather a strong enough army to relieve the castle, and he was forced to abandon the garrison to its fate. This failure was seen as a sign of great weakness, and many of his retainers began to lose faith in him completely. The Takeda clan, once so mighty, was now bleeding from 1,000 cuts. In a desperate attempt to show strength and create a new centre for his power, Katsuyori began building a massive new castle at Shinpu. This project, however, backfired. It was incredibly expensive and required heavy taxes and labour from his already struggling people and vassals. Instead of inspiring confidence, it was seen as a foolish waste of resources at a time when the clan should have been rebuilding its armies. His retainers saw it not as a sign of a new beginning, but as the final act of a desperate leader who had lost his way. The loyalty that had held the Takeda clan together for generations was beginning to completely unravel. By early 1582, Oda Nobunaga decided it was time to finish the Takeda once and for all. He declared a final all-out war and assembled a massive coalition army. Forces led by his own son, Oda Nobutada, marched from the north. Tokugawa Ieyasu advanced from the south, and their allies, the Hojo clan, attacked from the east. It was a massive, multi-pronged invasion that the weakened Takeda had no hope of stopping. As the enemy armies poured into Takeda lands, Katsuyori's vassals, seeing that the end was near, abandoned him. Many surrendered without a fight, while others actively betrayed him, switching their allegiance to Nobunaga to save themselves. One of the most painful betrayals came from Katsuyori's own cousin, Anayama Baisetsu, who defected to the Tokugawa and guided their army through the province. With enemies closing in from all sides and his own men deserting him in droves, Katsuyori was forced to abandon his new unfinished castle at Shinpu. He set it on fire so that his enemies could not use it. With only a small group of loyal followers, numbering a few hundred men, women and children, he fled into the cold mountains of his homeland. The once proud leader of the Takeda was now a fugitive, hunted in his own lands, with nowhere left to run. In the cold grey dawn, the mountain paths were shrouded in a heavy mist, muffling every sound except the distant echo of hurried footsteps. The remnants of the Takeda clan, once proud and mighty, left behind a trail of scattered armour and broken banners as they pressed on through the dense forest, seeking sanctuary. Their destination was Iwadano Castle, its formidable walls rising above the treetops, a beacon of hope in the bleak landscape. The castle, once a symbol of loyalty and strength, now stood silent and foreboding. As the group approached the mountain pass, the gates remained firmly shut, guarded by an ominous silence. The air was thick with tension, the only movement the restless flutter of a single Takeda banner, battered by the wind. Suddenly, the stillness was shattered by the crack of gunfire. Smoke billowed from the castle walls as matchlock rifles unleashed a deadly volley, their shots echoing through the mountain pass. The path was now a gauntlet of danger, the way forward barred by betrayal. The betrayal was complete. The symbols of the Takeda's former glory lay trampled and forgotten, their hopes dashed upon the unforgiving earth. Surrounded by thick forest and sheer cliffs, there was nowhere left to run. The mountains themselves seemed to close in, sealing the fate of the Takeda. With grim determination, the last of the Takeda made their way to Tenmokuzan, a mountain whose name would soon be etched in sorrow. The forest floor was littered with the remnants of their journey, discarded armour, torn standards, and the silent testimony of their struggle. Here, in the shadow of ancient trees, the Takeda prepared for their final stand. Their numbers had dwindled, but their resolve remained unbroken, symbolized by the banners that still stood defiant against the coming storm. Among the last possessions were the cherished crests of the Takeda, reminders of a proud lineage. The few remaining belongings spoke of families gathered together, awaiting the inevitable. In the distance, the Oda army advanced relentlessly, their banners a tide of red and gold sweeping through the valleys. The ground shook with the approach of countless feet, the air heavy with the promise of destruction. Yet the Takeda would not yield. Their weapons were readied, their banners raised high, each symbol a vow to fight to the last. The battle erupted in a frenzy of steel and smoke. The forest echoed with the clash of unseen swords, the banners of the Takeda standing tall even as the ground was stained with blood. On March 11th, 1582, the final battle raged beneath the pale light of dawn. The mountain was transformed into a place of chaos and sorrow, the air thick with the acrid scent of gunpowder and the cries of the dying, now lost to the wind. As the last defenders fell, the symbols of the Takeda's honour were lowered for the final time. Ritual daggers, once gleaming, now bore silent witness to the clan's tragic end. The women of the household, too, met their fate with quiet dignity. The clearing was left empty, save for the white garments and the fallen banner, a final testament to their sacrifice. With the deaths of Katsuyori and his heir, the main line of the Takeda was extinguished. The ruins of their camp and the weathered family crest were all that remained of a once great house. For over a century the Takeda had shaped the fate of Japan. Their rise under Shingen was the stuff of legend, but their fall was swift and merciless, leaving only ashes and memories. The Tiger of Kai was gone, his legacy erased from the land he once ruled. The sun rose over a silent battlefield, the story of the Takeda now consigned to legend. Word of the Takeda's destruction spread swiftly, carried by messengers across the countryside. In every village the news was met with shock and sorrow. With the fall of the Takeda, One of the last great obstacles to unification was swept away. The land was forever changed, and a new chapter in Japan's history began. In the wake of the Takeda clan's destruction, the land lay silent beneath a heavy sky. The banners of Oda Nobunaga, now tattered but triumphant, stood alone among the remnants of battle, symbols of a new era dawning over central Japan. The Oda banners now claimed a vast swath of the heartland. Castles that once bristled with resistance now flew his colours, and the roads between provinces bustled with the movement of messengers and supplies, all under his command. In the aftermath, Nobunaga's rewards were distributed with careful precision. Chests of gold and precious scrolls changed hands, sealing alliances and binding the loyalty of those who had fought at his side. Among the spoils, the province of Suruga, once fiercely defended by the Takeda, was formally granted to a new master, its fields and villages now pledged to a different banner. The transfer of Suruga's strongholds and fertile lands shifted the balance of power, strengthening the bonds between the great houses and ensuring the stability of Nobunaga's new order. For a fleeting moment, the land seemed poised on the edge of unity. The dream of a single, unbroken realm, long the ambition of warlords, appeared within reach as peace settled over the battered fields. Nobunaga's authority was absolute. His seat of power, once contested, now stood unchallenged, and the symbols of his rule gleamed in the halls where rivals had once plotted. Yet beneath the surface the Sengoku Jidai's treacherous spirit lingered. The winds of fortune could shift without warning, and the peace was as fragile as the banners that marked the camps. Only months after his triumph, in the quiet of a Kyoto night, fate turned. The temple of Honnoji, once a sanctuary, became the stage for betrayal. In the darkness, the peace was shattered. The temple's silence was broken by the clash of steel and the flicker of flames as treachery struck from within. Surrounded by fire and betrayal, Nobunaga's fate was sealed. Whether by enemy blade or his own hand, his story ended within the inferno, leaving only ashes and legend behind. At that moment, in the bustling port city of Sakai, the world continued unaware. The city's markets and harbours thrived, untouched by the storm gathering nearby. News of the disaster spread like wildfire. The message, when it arrived, brought a chill to those who received it. Danger now lurked in every shadow, and the safety of home seemed impossibly distant. In the darkness, a desperate flight began. Through forests and over mountains, the loyal few guided their charge home, vanishing into the night as unseen protectors. With Nobunaga gone, the heart of his empire was left hollow. The seat of power, so recently secure, now stood empty and vulnerable. The realm he had built so swiftly now teetered on the brink, its future uncertain and its borders threatened by ambition and chaos. In the shadows of the empty council, the ambitions of powerful men stirred. The struggle for control would begin anew, as the fate of the land hung in the balance. Before any could seize the moment, a new force moved with astonishing speed. The drums of war sounded once more, echoing across the countryside. The momentum shifted to a new contender, a leader whose ambition and cunning would soon shape the destiny of the nation. Far to the west, armies marched with relentless speed. Peace was brokered in haste, and the race to the capital began, driven by the urgency of opportunity. The confrontation was swift and brutal. The traitors' forces were swept aside, and vengeance was claimed in the name of the fallen lord. The victor's name echoed across the land, celebrated in every camp and castle. The hour belonged to the one who had acted with speed and resolve. With careful strategy, the new leader presented himself as the rightful heir. The symbols of succession were displayed, and the halls of power prepared for a new master. Through negotiation and cunning, rivals were outmaneuvered. The territories of the Oda were gathered under a single hand, and the struggle for dominance entered a new phase. The collapse of the Takeda had set these events in motion. Nobunaga's triumph, so complete, had led directly to his own undoing, and the land was plunged once more into turmoil. In the chaos that followed, the opportunity for a new ruler emerged. The struggle for supremacy would decide the fate of all Japan. The stage was set for the final act, the unification of Japan, begun by Nobunaga and made possible by the dramatic fall of the Takeda, now awaited its completion at the hands of a new and determined leader. In the years that followed the fall of the Takeda clan, the scars of war lingered long after the last banners had been lowered. Across the valleys of Kai and Suruga, once vibrant fields lay barren, the earth churned by countless marching feet and stained by the memory of conflict. The mighty walls of Takeda castles, now empty and overgrown, stood as silent witnesses to the passage of time, moss creeping over stone, wildflowers blooming where warriors once stood guard. In the forest that bordered the old Takeda lands, the animals returned cautiously. Deer wandered through abandoned encampments, and birds nested in the beams of ruined gates. Rivers, once choked with the debris of sieges, ran clear again, carrying stories of the past to distant shores. The seasons turned, each one erasing a little more of the devastation, as nature reclaimed what had been lost to ambition. Trade routes, once guarded by Takeda patrols, grew tangled and uncertain. Merchants, wary of shifting allegiances, hesitated at the borders where new banners flew. The villages that survived rebuilt slowly, their people shaped by hardship and wary of the next storm. Fields were planted anew, but the harvests were thin, and the echoes of distant battles haunted the quiet evenings. In the temples and shrines scattered across the region, incense smoke curled into the air as monks chanted for the souls lost to war. The names of fallen lords and forgotten samurai faded from the records, but the legends persisted, stories whispered by wind through bamboo groves and carried by the rain onto empty roads. Yet even as the memory of the Takeda faded from the annals of power, their legacy endured in subtler ways. The strategies and tactics born in their mountain strongholds were studied by future generations. The fierce loyalty of their retainers became a standard for others to follow. The land itself, shaped by centuries of defence and cultivation, bore the invisible imprint of their rule. And so, in the quiet aftermath, the world moved on. Empires rose and fell, borders shifted, and new lords claimed the valleys and peaks that once belonged to the Takeda. But the land remembered. In every ruined keep, in every silent forest, and in every stone shaped by a forgotten hand, the echoes of the Takeda lingered, an enduring testament to the clan that once dared to challenge the fate of a nation. As the Takeda faded into legend, Japan's political landscape transformed in their absence. Across the provincial map, borders blurred and hardened anew, each shift marked not by marching armies, but by the silent rise and fall of banners on distant hills. In the empty halls of former Takeda castles, new emblems hung from cracked rafters, their unfamiliar colours fluttering in the mountain winds. Beyond the ruined strongholds, the domain's boundaries became a battleground of influence rather than steel. Scrolls bearing the seals of ambitious warlords travelled along winding roads, their wax imprints signifying new alliances and secret betrayals. In the shadows of ancient trees, messenger birds took flight, their wings carrying cryptic orders to unseen agents waiting in the dark. In the old Takeda heartland, rice fields, once measured and taxed by the clan's careful stewards, now yielded their harvest to distant powers. Tax ledgers, freshly inked, piled up in village storehouses, their columns reflecting the changing hands of authority. The names of new rulers, stamped in red, replaced those that had governed for generations, while coins bearing unfamiliar crests exchanged hands in the markets that lined the river banks. On the borders, makeshift barriers of bamboo and rope signalled the uncertain reach of emergent domains. Here patrol banners of rival clans, Tokugawa blue, Oda crimson, Hojo white, swayed in the breeze, marking claims that shifted with every passing season. Even the forests and rivers, untouched by human presence, bore subtle signs of change, boundary stones carved with new symbols, and shrines draped in fresh offerings from those seeking favour with the latest lords. In the capital, distant from the scars of battle, delicate folding screens depicted stylized maps, gold leaf tracing the rise and fall of power. Behind closed doors, unseen hands moved painted markers across the lacquered surface, each gesture echoing in the provinces far away. Yet, for all the plotting and the parchment, the land itself remained impartial, its mountains unmoved, its rivers flowing as they always had. Thus, in the quiet spaces between conflict, the true legacy of victory and defeat played out, not with the clash of swords, but in the silent, ceaseless rearrangement of power. The memory of the Takeda lingered in the shifting banners and altered borders, a faint shadow beneath the ever-changing face of the nation. In the aftermath of shifting banners and silent alliances, the true legacy of the battlefield lingered not in the footsteps of warriors, but in the relics and designs they left behind. Across the trampled plains where armies once clashed, discarded arrowheads glinted in the soil, silent testaments to the deadly precision of Takeda archers. Nearby, pitted matchlock barrels and shattered gunpowder flasks lay half-buried, marking the dawn of a new age. The rise of firearms as decisive instruments of war. Atop battered ramparts, the intricate latticework of palisades and angled earthworks stood as mute evidence of evolving defences. Here, the genius of military engineers was etched into every trench and embankment, each curve designed to funnel attackers into deadly crossfire. In the shadow of battered gates, the iron spikes and hidden pitfalls of the Takeda's fortresses spoke of a mind ever wary of siege and sabotage. On the wind-swept moors, remnants of caltrops, spiked iron devices, still lay scattered, their points rusted, but their purpose clear, to maim charging cavalry and slow the advance of enemy foot soldiers. Beyond these traps, faded lines marked the ground where rows of bamboo spears once bristled, forming a living wall against charging samurai and mounted lancers alike. Out in the fields, the ghosts of cavalry charges were whispered in the patterns of hoofprints, long since softened by rain. Here, the Takeda's famed mounted archers had unleashed storms of arrows, their tactics blending speed, deception, and relentless pursuit. The remnants of signal fires, charred stones and blackened earth atop distant hills, hinted at the sophisticated communication networks that coordinated these thunderous assaults, relaying orders across vast distances with bursts of flame and smoke. In the quiet of abandoned watchtowers, stacks of signal banners and coded paper strips rested undisturbed, relics of a system that could summon reinforcements or feign retreat in the blink of an eye. Along riverbanks, the bones of hastily constructed pontoon bridges revealed the ingenuity required to move troops and supplies across treacherous waters, ensuring that no obstacle could halt the advance of an army well versed in the art of manoeuvre. Within the silent confines of a deserted armoury, racks of specialised armour bore the scars of battle-lacquered cuirasses pitted by musket balls, helmets dented by the force of falling stones, and shields scorched from close encounters with fire arrows. Each piece told a story of adaptation, of warriors striving to outpace the ever-changing face of war. And yet, as the seasons passed and moss crept over the ruins, these innovations endured as the quiet architects of victory and defeat. Their presence in the landscape, shaped by ingenuity, necessity, and the relentless march of conflict, became the unseen hand that guided the fate of clans and the destiny of nations. In the absence of voices and banners, it was these engines of war that whispered the final lessons of the battlefield, echoing through the silent fields where the Takeda once rode. Beneath the quiet canopy of ancient cedars, the legacy of the Takeda clan lingers, not in the clash of steel, but in the subtle transformation of the land and the spirit of a people. Moss-covered stones, once the foundations of Takeda fortresses, now form the boundaries of village gardens, their geometry echoing the defensive lines that once held armies at bay. In the nearby fields, the intricate patterns of irrigation channels, first carved to sustain marching troops, continue to nourish rice paddies, their water glistening under the same sun that once shone on banners of war. Within local shrines, the stylized Takeda-mon, or family crest, is etched into weathered wooden doors and engraved on prayer plaques, a symbol now evoking protection rather than conquest. At festival time, children dance around floats adorned with crimson horse motifs, an homage to the legendary cavalry that once thundered across these plains. The pounding of taiko drums recalls the rhythm of hooves and the urgent messages of signal fires, now transformed into rituals of celebration and remembrance. Along forgotten mountain trails, travellers stumble upon the remnants of signal towers and stone cairns. These silent sentinels have become waypoints for pilgrims, their original purpose lost to time, but their presence shaping new journeys, spiritual rather than martial. In the gentle curve of a bridge or the sturdy arch of a gate, the Takeda's architectural ingenuity endures, woven seamlessly into the daily lives of those who pass beneath their shade. In the art of local craftsmen, echoes of the clan's legacy are found in lacquerware, etched with patterns reminiscent of samurai armour, and in the weaving of textiles dyed the deep red of Takeda banners. Even in the melodies of folk songs and the brushwork of calligraphy, the spirit of resilience and adaptation, once the lifeblood of the Takeda, finds quiet expression. And beneath the earth, where arrowheads and matchlock fragments rest undisturbed, wildflowers bloom in unexpected patterns, their roots threading through the artifacts of war. Here nature reclaims the scars of conflict, transforming fields of battle into landscapes of reflection and renewal. The Takeda clan's legacy endures not as a tale of endless struggle, but as a silent force shaping culture, memory, and the very bones of the land. Through the quiet persistence of tradition and the gentle hand of time, the story of the Takeda is written anew with every season, a legacy not of conquest, but of transformation. In the hush that followed the clan's downfall, the fate of Takeda's loyal retainers was written not in chronicles, but in the quiet persistence of nature and the unspoken marks left upon the land. As their banners fell, the survivors did not vanish. They became shadows among the forests, rivers and valleys they once defended. At dawn the mist drifts over a secluded valley where wild bamboo grows in dense, deliberate groves. Here the careful arrangement of stalks forms a subtle pattern, a living code passed down by those who once pledged loyalty to Takeda. These groves, cultivated by unseen hands, serve as silent boundary markers for hidden hamlets, their origins known only to the oldest villagers. In a mountainside thicket, moss clings to the stones of a forgotten path. Among the tangled roots, a carefully placed arrangement of river pebbles stands out, an ancient signal left by Takeda scouts, now a guide for foragers and wandering animals. The path twists through ferns and overgrown plum trees, whose blossoms fall each spring in a cascade of crimson and white, a living memory of the clan's colours. By the river's edge, the descendants of Takeda's horse-masters left their mark not in stables, but in the spirited herds of wild ponies that roam the meadows. Their lineage preserved in the sure-footedness and fiery temperament of these untamed creatures. The horses gather at the ruins of old watering stations, their hooves stirring the dust where samurai once knelt. In the heart of the forest, the descendants' legacy endures in the artful pruning of ancient cedars. The trees grow in patterns that mirror the tactics of battlefield encampments, rings and clusters, each a living testament to strategies once whispered by firelight. Birds nest in their branches, carrying seeds to distant hills, spreading the unseen influence of Takeda's careful stewardship. Even in the silent stone lanterns tucked beside mountain springs, the retainer's touch endures. Lichen traces the outline of the Takeda Mon, barely visible but never erased, while the gentle trickle of water echoes the hidden flow of stories passed from one generation to the next, stories spoken only in the rustle of leaves and the ripple of streams. And so the fate of Takeda's survivors is revealed not in monuments or names, but in the resilience of the land itself. Through the wild horses, the secret groves and the time-worn paths, their presence lingers, roots unbroken, stories untold, yet forever woven into the living tapestry of the mountains and plains. Their legacy is not one of defeat, but of quiet endurance, a testament to those who survived not by the sword, but by their devotion to the land and to each other.